Okay, so we've done a rectangular prism and found the surface area of that, and our next job is going to be to find the surface area of a cylinder. Now, once again, we're going to try and create this formula ourselves, just as first time, and then from there, we will be able to use that formula forevermore. Now, let's look at this cylinder and try to identify these two measurements we've got. So, the first measurement we have is that 13 feet, and that runs all the way across that top circle. Now, if you remember from 6th grade, the word for that is diameter. Okay? We have the diameter, which is the distance all the way across. The radius is halfway across. So the radius would just be from the center dot over to one side. And we'll get to that in a moment. Now, this right here is our height. Just like before, the height is kind of that up and down or the distance between the two circles. So we've got a height and we've got a diameter. Now, looking at the surface area and trying to figure out how it relates to this net, you can see we should probably find the area of these two circles and then add that to the area of this rectangle. All right, so to begin with, the area for a circle, okay, is pi r squared, okay? Pi r squared. Now, we have not yet talked about that r. That r stands for radius. As I mentioned before, that's the distance halfway across a circle, about half the diameter, exactly half the diameter. Now, the other thing we have to find the area of is this rectangle, okay? And rectangles, as always, you just multiply the two sides, the length times the width. So that would be L times W. Now let's go back over here and write down what we have so far. And that's that the surface area is equal to the area of two circles, pi times the radius squared, plus the area of the midsection, which is a rectangle, and we've identified as having an area of length times width. Now the problem comes here when we look at our cylinder and we realize, well, we don't have any measurements like length or width. We just don't have those. We have height, which is excellent. We can actually come over here and we can use that height instead of length. We can say this is the distance from the top to the bottom, so we're going to call that the height. But how do we find this distance, the width? I'm not really sure. Well, the good news is that if you remember, when this was a cylinder, this rectangle wrapped all the way around this circle. That's important because we have a special name for all the way around a circle. The perimeter of a circle is also known as the circumference. And the formula for that is twice, or 2 times, pi times the radius. So instead of width, we're going to use 2 times the pi and radius. So let's go ahead and fill that in. Instead of width, or instead of length, we're going to have 2 times pi times the radius. And then instead of that length, or instead of that vertical, we're going to have height. Now, I know that was very confusing, but the important thing to remember, whoops, I forgot an H here. Or no, I didn't. I forgot an H here. The important thing to remember is that these two circles have an area of pi r squared, and this rectangle has an area of 2 pi r h. The reason that's important is when we come down here to make our official formula, we have two circles, so 2 times pi r squared, so each of those is a circle, plus the area of the rectangle, which is 2 pi r h. Now, as it relates to this problem, we do have a bit of an issue here. Our formula asks for the height, which we have, and we can easily plug in. But it asks for the radius too, and we don't have that. But that's okay, because as I mentioned before, in order to find the radius, we just need to find half of the diameter. And since the diameter is 13, we know that r is going to equal half that, which, thanks to some mental math, I know is 6.5. If your mental math is a little rusty, that's okay. You can always use a calculator. So we have a radius of 6.5, we have a height of 6, which is right here, and we are all ready to use this formula. Let's go ahead and plug it in. Make sure to use your parentheses. We have 2 pi. Again, I'm going to use parentheses around my 6.5, but don't forget the squared, plus 2 pi times the radius, again 6.5, times the height. Now I can do some simplifying here, some calculations. 6.5 squared is 42.25. I didn't do that in my head. I have a calculator. So we got 42.25. And then we can add that to 6.5 times 6 is 39. So we have 2 pi times 39. We can condense this all down. Let's see, that's 42.25 times 2. I'm going to call that 84.5 pi plus 78 pi equals 162.5 pi. The reason I keep doing this in terms of pi is that pi, as you know, is a very long and very messy irrational number, and it can cause some issues if we round too early or if we just use 3.14. I think that on your test you should be fine using 3.14 as your pi, but your calculator also does have a pi button, so you can use that as well. But when I end up doing this multiplication, I get that our surface area is 510.5, and then we have to decide on units. Well, we did have feet, but as you recall, area is a little different. It's going to be feet squared. So I've got 510.5 feet squared. Thanks for sticking with me through that very difficult explanation. Again, just take another look here at the way the formula was put together. We've got 2 circles and 1 rectangle. All right, down below you have 2 problems to practice for yourself on. The first one involves a cylinder, and the second one involves a rectangular prism. So make sure to use your formulas. You don't have to draw a picture or anything unless you want to, but that's all for us. Thank you for following along.